Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out this evening for our Police Civilian Internal Affairs Review Commission Annual Summit. This is our second one since the process has moved over to the Human Rights Department. So last year we were at Progressive Baptist Church. We had a very nice turnout, and we had these interactions at tables. So we decided, let's start out with the table process, get people around each other, get them comfortable, so that will lead to further discussion in the evening. My name is Jeff Martin. I'm Interim Director in the Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity Office, or HERO as we call it. I want to welcome you to tonight's annual summit. The purpose of this is to get feedback from you. We're going to present you with some information. We're going to present you with some data, some numbers, but really we want to have conversation with you, because this is your Police Civilian Internal Affairs Review Commission. It's here to serve the community. It's here to assist the police. It is yours. So in order for you to get the most out of it, you have to participate tonight. And hopefully some more people will come, but I think we have enough activists in the room that we will have a very active conversation, which is what we're hoping for. Tonight's agenda is very, very brisk, because we want to get to the point where we are going to the breakout table discussions. We're going to have, at this time, we're going to have the commissioners come up one at a time and introduce themselves, say which district they're from if they happen to know, and a little bit about themselves so you know who they are. Thank you.
My name is Rick Heidinger. I'm a new commissioner, and I live 3 blocks from here. I don't know what district I'm in.
Good evening. My name is Constance Tuck. I'm the chair of the commission, and I live in Highland.
Hello, I'm Rachel Sullivan Nightingale, Vice Chair of the Commission. I live in the North End.
Hi, my name is Travis Grundy, and I am a new commissioner. I am from Dayton's Bluff.
Hello, my name is Kristen Clark, and I am from the Hamlin-Midway area, Ward 4. Eric Forstrom, who is not here tonight due to a pre-existing obligation, he is also from Ward 4.
Good evening, my name is Sasha Cotton. I'm one of the commissioners, and I live right here in this area in the Summit University neighborhood of Ward 1.
Good evening. My name is Julian Roby. I am the coordinator. I live in West 7th neighborhood. Thank you all for being here. Let's get started. So as Director Martin mentioned, we have a very packed agenda tonight. We really value you all's feedback, and we want to make sure we're thorough and we get through explaining the process of the PCR, some of the events that have taken place over the last year, so we can learn from you all what you would like to see, what you think we're doing well, what we can be improved upon, and what we can incorporate into this process. So beginning with the PCR legislative authority, the power of the PCR and all civilian oversight authorities in Minnesota is limited by the Peace Officer Discipline Procedures Act through the Minnesota Statute Section 626.89. The Act prohibits civilian oversight authorities from making a finding of fact or determination regarding a complaint against an officer and from imposing discipline on said officer. Therefore, the commission meetings are not considered administrative hearings, and the commission is limited to offering advisory decisions concerning all alleged police misconduct to the chief of police. PCR does not make criminal or civil findings. So, for example, if discrimination is alleged, and the commission will view the officer's behavior in terms of a violation of police or city code of conduct or other policy, not in terms of whether a federal, state, or local civil rights law was violated. Recordings of the PCR meetings cannot be used for civil or criminal proceedings, neither. The power of the PCR. So the commission has the power to review complaints against the St. Paul Police Department and employees that are completed by, they are reviewing investigations completed by Internal Affairs Unit around allegation criteria, discrimination, excessive force, racial profiling, inappropriate firearm use, and poor public relations. Additional complaints can be referred to the Commission either from the Mayor, the Chief of Police, or the Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity Department Director. Now I'll go forward and explain the process of the PCR. As a review coordinator, my job is managing the intake of complaints. Essentially what that means is when a complaint comes in, I review it for that it meets the criteria for it to be an official complaint. Essentially meaning that it must have a name, contact information, and some signature, whether electronic or an actual signature via paper form. The complaints can come in a variety of different forms, either through online, through our various intake sites, or can be mailed in or come through our HERO office and meet with me personally. After the complaint has been reviewed for completeness, it's passed on to Internal Affairs for their investigation. Senior Commander Thomaser will now come forward and explain that process.
My name is Rob Thomaser. I'm the Senior Commander of Internal Affairs. I serve the department as the Chief of Staff for Chief Axtell, and one of my collateral duties is to oversee the Internal Affairs Unit. Let's see if I get to my presentation here. One of the things that the Internal Affairs Unit does is investigate complaints. And I think everybody understands that, but we also have some other collateral duties in addition to investigating complaints. We oversee a couple of department functions. One of those is anytime an officer uses force in the department, the Internal Affairs Unit reviews that use of force incident, whether or not a complaint was made. To look for policy violations and other aspects of that case. If we find that the case may not meet all policy recommendations, we refer that to the Chief of Ops, who then reviews the case with the Use of Force Committee. We also are in charge of some administrative functions, such as downloading and reviewing all the TASER usage and logs every quarter. And then we also are the reviewers of any time there is a critical incident in the department. What is a critical incident? A critical incident is any time there's an action taken by an employee of the police department that leads to the death or the likelihood of death of another person. And so all those things fall into the Internal Affairs Office, and we do those in addition to investigating the complaints that come from the department. So complaints come from a number of different areas. As Julian said, the HERO office is willing and able to take your complaint in a number of different ways. You can do it online without even showing up. You can come into the office. You can fill out forms that they'll mail to you. There's all sorts of different options. You can also, though, report directly to the police department if you like. The police department takes a number of complaints every year, just like the HERO office, and we investigate them just as if it was received by HERO. The city, HERO, and the department also have a number of partnerships where we work with community partners who will also work with people who think that they want to make a complaint, but they're not really comfortable coming right to the police department or coming to the city, so that they'll go to their place that they're most comfortable. A couple of those partnerships include the St. Paul chapter of the NAACP. They will take complaints and they'll refer them to the department, either through HERO or directly, and we'll investigate those just as if someone showed up at the police department. The city and the department and HERO wants to make sure if a person is willing to come forward to make a complaint, that we do everything that we can and within our power to ensure that that complaint gets investigated and referred to the PCR as the ordinance requires. Once a complaint is received by the department, it comes to me. Every complaint received ends up on my desk. I read it, I evaluate it, and I classify it. Now, this is merely an administrative function for the department. As an employer, we are required to keep records on our employees, and so that we can standardize those records, we try to fit complaints into one of these categories. It's very possible that a complaint could end up with 2 of these categories or more. Generally, though, we try to fit them within one category. The reason for this is record keeping and for public release later on down the road. If a complaint comes in, we'll talk about this later, I won't get too deep into it, but if the complaint is sustained against the officer, that complaint is public. So what we want to do is, as much as possible, keep these complaints together in one package so that if there is a data request down the road, we're not trying to sort through and separate them and stuff like that. But I classified into one of these categories and then make a determination then of who's going to look at that complaint, who's going to investigate it. Now you would say, hey, well, Internal Affairs is supposed to do that, and you're generally right. Internal Affairs investigates a large majority of the complaints that are received by HERO or the department. There are times where we will make a referral of an investigation of a complaint out to the district, the patrol district, or the investigative unit where the employee works. So a number of reasons that might happen. We only do this in minor cases or incidents of more minor infractions. Never a use of force case, never a discrimination case. But if, let's say, a complaint came in where someone feels an officer parked their car illegally in front of a restaurant while they're having lunch, and that complaint came in, we might refer that to the district so that the district supervisor can investigate that, report that in the same format that Internal Affairs completes the investigation, and then that also goes to the PCR just like Internal Affairs investigation would. One of the reasons why we might do that is, let's say the officer is a midnight officer, and they're going to be harder for Internal Affairs to get a hold of and work with during business hours when we work. It might be better to facilitate that investigation through the district. So sometimes we do that. As Julian said, very clearly, we are bound by certain rules. We follow an employment law. We follow the policies of the city. We follow civil service rules, and we also follow the Minnesota Disciplinary Procedures Act for police officers. That's a requirement that's set forward by the state. We understand it very well, and we follow the rules very closely. We want to make sure that if an infraction is or a policy violation is complained of, when we investigate that, we've investigated it following all the rules so that the employer, if the employer determines that the employee did something wrong, the employer can take action against that employee and not be able to give discipline because of a technical infraction of how he investigated the complaint. So it's very precise in how we do it, and again, our job is to protect the chief of police who may want to impose discipline against an employee, and we don't want to present a case to him that he loses, and I say loses because if you think of a court case, it's going to be presented and arbitrated through a legal process. We want to make sure that we give them a solid case in which that they can impose discipline. These are sort of the parameters that I have to follow when investigating a case, and what this pretty much says, and you'll understand why I'm telling you this in a moment, but what this pretty much says is if I'm going to compel an employee to speak to me, I have to satisfy these elements that are on screen. I have to have a signed complaint. That's what Julian and HERO does in a lot of cases. They make sure we have a complaint that meets the requirements of PODPA. That's, if you've ever heard that term, this is where it comes from, PODPA. We have to follow certain parameters in how we conduct an interview, when we conduct an interview, and what rights are afforded to an employee when we conduct that interview. Why does this exist, do you think? And that's a really good question, and I think the answer is I am allowed to compel a police officer to make a statement as a condition of their employment. Now, if you think about that, a lot of things that police officers do that might not be within policy might also not be legal. And that means they are afforded constitutional protections against self-incrimination. I can, though, under this, compel that employee to talk to me, and we make a little agreement, so to speak, between us. It's under this case law, Garrity versus New Jersey, which means I can compel that statement from you, but what you tell me can't be used against you in a criminal proceeding. So you think, do we think of that ever? Do we consider that? And there are times that I would say yes. And what I mean is if an employee, we think an employee has committed a criminal infraction that might be prosecuted, I'm probably not going to move forward on an internal affairs investigation. Because what I don't want to do is damage a case that might be presented to a prosecutor. Now, there are times where we'll evaluate where we will do both at the same time, but a lot of times we'll wait. Here's an example. If an employee is off duty and, let's say, is arrested for driving under the influence, we will not initiate an internal affairs complaint. Well, that's not true. We'll initiate an internal affairs complaint, but we will not investigate until the criminal process is done. And then we'll use what is learned in the criminal process as factual evidence in an employment matter. We'll do those in order like that. That's normally the case of criminal versus policy violations. And our goal, again, is to make sure that we are following and be very precise with the laws and the rules so that we don't wreck a process where someone who might have been the subject of improper behavior doesn't get to be represented because we screwed up the case. So we're trying to be very precise, very good at what we do. You can probably think of a couple of cases where an employee wasn't compelled to give a statement, and you wonder why is that? And I'm thinking of a very prominent Minneapolis case. And there were reasons that Minneapolis probably didn't compel that matter as an employment matter, because it might not have been the most important issue at the time. So that's just a little explanation there. And that's, by the way, speculation, because I have no idea if that's what happened. You're a lawyer, right? All right, thanks. All right, so we have this complaint, and one of the things I was asked to do is talk a little bit in depth about how we handle and what we do with a complaint. And what I kind of do here is first identify what happens with the complaint. As I said, it's reviewed by me, and I then decide a very important question. Will we investigate? And right, one of the reasons we may not investigate is because it might rise to a criminal infraction by part of the employee, and we might want to set that aside and let a criminal process take place first. The Internal Affairs Unit does not conduct criminal investigations against employees. We refer that normally to another police department who does not have an interest in the outcome of the case. It's for transparency, it's for fairness, and the St. Paul Police Department is not going to investigate its own employees to determine whether or not they committed a crime. You can understand the appearance of that. It's not the best way to go. There are other reasons, though, why I might not choose to investigate. And the number one reason I might not choose to investigate is because the complaint made is not made against my employee. And I do not have the authority to investigate employees of another jurisdiction. So what I normally do is send a letter and refer that complainant to the right department. I'll find out where they work, I'll refer them to the right department, and I'll also send that complaint to that department. So if I can, even though the complaint isn't against someone from the city of St. Paul, if I can provide service to the person who's complaining, I'm going to help them get to the right spot and do that. There are other times where I might not investigate a complaint. There are some times where the person complaining is doing so while they're sitting in jail, and they're part of an active criminal investigation, and what they're complaining about is material to their criminal investigation. We don't investigate those because if you're a defendant in a criminal case and I go and I talk to you, what you tell me can be used against you. So to protect you in your criminal matter, I will contact the prosecutor, and I will tell the prosecutor that someone has made a complaint about this criminal case. The facts of that complaint might be material to their defense. And the prosecutor then is, under this law called Brady, obligated to tell the court if they think it would help the defendant in their case. I also tell the defendant that this is something they need to speak with their counsel about so that they can get this matter in front of court. Now what are we talking about? A lot of people will call or make a complaint and say, the officers who arrested me conducted an illegal search. Now, an illegal search would be a policy violation, very clearly. But what we want to do is give that to the court to make a determination, because if I investigate it as a policy violation, but I don't raise those facts to the court, and the person ends up getting convicted because facts are withheld, that wouldn't be in their best interest. So again, we try to be very considerate of those who are making a complaint about behavior and helping them through the legal process as much as we can. We do get some complaints that are just so far from reality that we can't investigate. And I've seen complaints like the officers are pointing nuclear weapons at my house. Now, we know that's probably not possible. So what we do is we look at these complaints and we don't sit and giggle and try to figure out what to do with them. We try to help these folks, because a lot of folks suffer from mental illness or other things, and our goal is to try to get them help. So we'll make referrals to our mental health folks. A lot of times before we'll close the case, we'll meet with our mental health unit. We'll go out with our mental health unit and meet with these folks and try to evaluate how can we really help them. And sometimes that results in us not moving forward in a criminal investigation, or I'm sorry, in an internal affairs investigation. We might get them the mental health resources that they need. And if we can help people that way, I think that's every bit as important as us investigating the cases of misconduct. And so that's the approach that we take with looking at cases and evaluating whether or not we're going to investigate. Once that's happened, as I told you, I sign the investigation out, we investigate it. Once it's done, it comes back to me, I evaluate it. I evaluate it for many things. First thing and foremost is just cause. If we talk about winning cases at the end, there are certain things in employment law called just cause that the employer has to meet to make sure that the employer can take action against the employee. So I evaluate it from that. I make sure we're factually complete. I make sure that we've covered all bases. I make sure we've recovered all evidence that's possible. And I evaluate it just as I would if I was an investigative commander in charge of domestic assaults or sex crimes or homicides or robberies. I would evaluate to make sure we did the most complete investigation possible. Once that's done, the case then can go one of two ways. It will either go to the PCR for evaluation, or it'll go directly to the chief of police. Now, Julian put up 5 conditions in which the ordinance calls for cases to go directly to the PCR. Excessive force, poor PR, racial profiling. Help me out, Julian. What's improper procedure? Thank you. No, not improper procedure. Thank you. Discrimination. And lastly, if the chief, the hero director, or the mayor decide it does, right? So it's those 4 conditions, plus one of those people can weigh in. The department, though, also, because it has an agreement with the NAACP back to 2001, will also send any and all external complaints received to the PCR. So if someone calls and complains about that parking complaint, doesn't meet one of the criteria of above, but because it was received by an external source, we're going to send that to the PCR in addition to what the ordinance requires. And the reason for that is the PCR is your voice, and they get to evaluate things, and they get to put a value on what occurred, and they get to make a recommendation to the chief. So we go a little bit above and beyond what the ordinance requires, and again, that's the satisfying agreement that we had with the NAACP back from 2001. All right, so once it goes to the PCR, or if it's not going to go to the PCR, it's going to go straight to the chief. Now, there's times where I'll investigate something where a unit commander will say, this employee has been violating the department's sick usage policy. We would investigate that, we would write that up just like anything else, but because it's not externally generated, because it's not part of that list, it would go straight to the chief of police. Once the chief of police makes a decision, which is considered final, then the complaint is closed and the employment matter happens as it's going to go. So, complaints. This is, I think, where Julie wanted me to spend a little bit of time. How do we do complaints? So, first you should know the investigators who handle internal affairs complaints are criminal crimes investigators. They're trained and seasoned in doing criminal investigations, and their job at the time is to serve the chief's office in doing employment matters. What I'm trying to make a point on is that they are seasoned investigators who know how to put together an investigation, they know how to look for evidence, they know how to conduct interviews, and they know how to put together a complete package that would be worthy of going in front of a prosecutor who would take that case in front of a jury and a judge. So the employees that are doing these investigations handle their investigations much like they would a criminal investigation. They are to interview everybody involved that they can possibly interview. They're to find all physical evidence that might exist. And today, physical evidence can exist in many, many forms. Video, audio. Now there's so much technology with locating people by different means, right? Card readers or all these things, right? Their job is to evaluate a case and determine where does the evidence exist, and their job is to pull that together. Now you wonder why would a cop do this job, right? Why would a cop, because I think there would be a belief that officers aren't going to want to investigate other officers. And what I can tell you is the women and men that are working in the unit have always come there looking to expand their knowledge base so that they can set themselves up for a command position someday, right? They're learning employment law is what they're doing. It's an administrative function, but they're doing something different than criminal investigations. But they always approach the job with this sort of thought that their job isn't to judge whether the behavior of the officer was right or wrong. Their job is just to put together an objective document that contains all the facts that they can find so that somebody else can judge. So they're kind of guilt-free in that they're not judging officers for what they do. They're not responsible for determining whether the officers did something right or wrong. They're not, because the appearance could be is that, hey, you're investigating somebody you used to work on patrol with, and you maybe would be biased to not call balls and strikes like you're supposed to do. Well, again, we don't ask them to judge. We just ask them to put together a file, a complete file, and my job, working directly for the chief of police, is to evaluate that file, and I bet you I send back 2 in 10, maybe 3 in 10, to say, hey, I think we're missing something here, we need another opinion here, let's figure out this, did we check that, you know, those sort of things. So it's a very rigorous process to get that investigation through. We now have body-worn camera, and before body-worn camera, there was a lot of cases where the complainant would say one thing and the officer would say another, and the poor PCR had to come up with this category called not sustained, which means not enough facts for, not enough facts against. And I would say prior to the body cam, the largest percentage of the cases that were settled were probably not sustained. And that was just because there wasn't enough evidence to say either way. Now with the body cam, I haven't studied this and come up with empirical data, but I can say it seems as if that's usually not the case any longer. The PCR is usually able to, and the chief, if he's evaluating, are very able to get to the core of what happened because there's so much video that exists now of the incident. And whether that's body-worn camera video, which I think helps the most, or before that we had in-car camera. And in-car camera was good is if we were working around the car. If we weren't working around the car, which a lot of times we're not, we're in somebody's house, we're in somebody's business, we're in a school, we didn't have that. So I think things are improving in understanding the interactions between people and police officers, and the department couldn't be more delighted in having that tool. And I'll be honest, talking to the officers who wear them, I think they're pretty happy that they have them too. And I think they know that they have them on. I think the largest percentage of them are commensurate professionals who are not afraid of people seeing their work. Do people make mistakes? Yeah, they do, and these people call them out. Thanks. Trying to keep up with my time here. We talked about when they're finished, where they go, as always, and what's decided is, and this is an important fact, is the chief of police always decides the final discipline. I think you're going to talk about if there's a discipline. Okay. This is another administrative function, and when a case is done, when it's investigated, it's going to get one of these classifications. And most important is to note is the sustained, right? If it's sustained, that means somebody was guilty of committing a policy violation. All the others more or less mean there wasn't. And we try to put that it wasn't a policy violation into some sort of category. Again, it's administrative function. It's so that we can have very consistent record keeping. Is there a best way to apply these? Yeah, not always, I don't think, and I think you guys find that out a lot. But really, it comes down to you have the sustained category, and that means there's a preponderance of evidence that someone committed a policy violation. All others mean something else sort of happened. One of the big things that's on here is a policy failure, and I don't know if you're going to talk about any of this, but the PCR has under its authority to review policy and make recommendations on policy. And I've been part of cases actually where the commission has looked at a case and they have said, yeah, this shouldn't have happened. But the policy doesn't prevent it, so we should make a recommendation that the policy should be changed. And that's actually happened a lot, and it's an important function and something that's made the department better. Again, another administrative function is when a policy violation has occurred, then we take action against the employee. These are the things that can result. By our contract, supervisory counseling is not discipline, and I'll tell you why that's important later, but and neither is retraining. But the oral reprimand through termination are different measures of discipline, and if an employee is found guilty of violating a policy and they're disciplined, two key factors, it's public. If they're guilty of if they're found guilty of violating a policy and they receive a supervisory counseling, not public. So it's very important in the minutia because there's a lot of folks that make data requests about these cases, and there's sometimes when they say, well, wait a second, why is it not public? And so I guess I'm just trying to help bring some understanding to that. I already talked about we don't do criminal investigations. We normally don't do parallel investigations. Again, if you make a complaint, or if someone you know makes a complaint, or if you think that you want more information about a particular officer, you can request to see if they've ever been disciplined. And again, if they've been disciplined as a result of a policy violation, those two things, that information is public and you can have access to it. Most of those cases will come to you very, very much as they're printed off the printer, unredacted. If Director Martin and I are both as part of the case, and he was guilty and I wasn't, which is a very likely scenario, everything about me in that complaint that you get will be redacted out, because that's not public. But the guilty violation would be available to you. We talked about that. I think I beat that to death. So the department is very proud of its standard, and we're very proud of our relationship working with Director Martin and his team. There's always room to grow. We're always willing to take your feedback. We're always willing to learn how we can do better. But our goal is always to provide trusted service with respect. And if we are missing the mark, I'd love to hear from you. That's my information on the board. Chief's office would love to hear from you. We are all about providing the best possible service that we can because we're very proud of the city and we're very proud to be able to wear the uniforms that we have to provide service to the city of St. Paul. So thank you.
So once Internal Affairs Unit has done their investigation, the complaint packet, the case form will come back to me, in which I pass these along to our commission, who review the complaint and cases for getting ready for the review and deliberation meeting. Our chair, Constance Tuck, will come forward now and provide some details on that process.
Thanks again to everyone for coming out on this very cold November night. I thought it might be helpful for folks to hear a little bit about the makeup of the commission and something about what we go through in order to become commission members, because that was those were a couple of the questions that we were asked the last time we were here. So first and foremost, I think all commission members are volunteers. We're not city employees. We volunteer for the work that we do. We have every ward in St. Paul is represented on the commission. I'm happy to say that now. We have recently gotten 2 new commission members, and maybe they can just raise their hands. I won't embarrass them by calling them out, but there they are. They were just recently appointed by the mayor and approved by city council. So we're now up to our full complement of 9. As you can see or may know, we have a range of diversity in the commission. We have some commission members in the 18 to 35-year-old group. We have some retired. Most commission members still hold full-time jobs. They work in nonprofits, public and private sector. We have different ethnicities, political persuasions, life experiences, professional experiences. But we're all here and committed to working to make St. Paul a better place to live. We go through quite a bit of training. Every commissioner who participates in reviewing and making recommendations about complaints must complete 30 hours of the police civilian training. And this is a lot of the same training that police officers undergo in the academy. We participate in or observe making routine traffic stops. We participate in ride-alongs with police officers and discuss the policies and practices relating to the use of force. We also complete several hours of training on hidden bias and diversity, data privacy laws within the state of Minnesota, and respectful workplace policies. And again, these are the same trainings that St. Paul police officers and city employees undergo. It is a big time commitment to serve on the commission. We meet for 3 to 4 hours monthly, usually from 6 to 9 or 6 to 10 p.m. We get about 2 weeks to review in advance to review our cases. And I would say typically we get 4 to 6 cases each month that we've been seeing to review, and probably spend anywhere from 15 to 25 hours per month on commission work. Some of us spend more. So it's a big commitment, and I just wanted folks to understand who we are and what we do. As far as the process goes, when we get the information from the police department, we get it on a laptop. We may see body cam footage if it's available. We see the in-camera footage if it's available. We see the statements of the complainant, any witnesses. We see, we have access to police department policies that we can then compare to whatever actions the officers have taken or are alleged to have taken. We get statements from the officers themselves, and we also give the complainants and the officers both an opportunity to come and present their side of the case to the commission. So folks are allowed to come in and testify before the commission as to what they saw and what happened. They could also have a witness testify as well. So once we have we've seen all that material and gathered all the facts, we sit down and deliberate amongst us and determine what we believe should be the outcome of a particular case. We don't always agree, and I think that's a good thing. You know, some of our decisions are decided based upon majority, and what we do is we use the standard of preponderance of the evidence, simply meaning that it's more likely than not that it either happened or didn't happen. And we make, when we make that final determination, again, as Commander Thomaser mentioned, if we decide that the complaint has been sustained, then we also take the next step, and we would make a recommendation to the chief of police as to what manner of discipline, if any, should be imposed. And again, we might decide, well, the officer needs some supervisory counseling, and or the officer might need some retraining. And that, again, wouldn't be considered discipline, but it's still a recommendation that we can make to the chief. Sometimes we might recommend both retraining and some form of discipline. So, those are there are a number of options that are available to us. But we make our recommendation to the chief. We make a recommendation, again, if it's sustained, as to what form of discipline we think should be taken. And then, by law, the chief of police makes the final decision as to what action should be taken in that complaint. If, for some reason, the chief of police does not agree with the recommendation of the PCARC, then the chief of police has to notify the coordinator, who is Julian, and Julian then notifies me as the chair, and then I will sit down and have a conversation with the chief and explain why I believe it should be, or why the commission made the recommendation that it did. But ultimately, the chief will make the final determination as to what action will be taken in that particular case. So with that,
Before I go forward in finishing out the rest of the process, I would like to give our final commissioner an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Neighborhood? Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Anika Bowie, and my neighborhood is a historic Rondo neighborhood. That's Ward 1. So actually, right now, that's University Summit. What is that called? Yeah, University Summit. So Summit University, excuse me, but historic Rondo neighborhood that I'm so proud to be from. Hello. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So as Constance mentioned, once the commission has deliberated and made their recommendation, my role as the coordinator is to write up a memo to the chief, who ultimately has the decision-making power, which should happen in said complaint. In the event that the chief disagrees with the commission's recommendation, he notifies me, who then notifies the chair, and we have a meeting and we discuss why that disagreement exists and essentially to come to some common ground. In the event that a complaint is sustained, the chief decides to impose said discipline, he can go, the officer has an opportunity to put forward a grievance process in which they can argue why, through their union representative, why the discipline should not be imposed upon, and that can play out over a set amount of weeks or months. So again, this process can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. However, it's a great opportunity for a community to have feedback and an opportunity to see how the police department is interacting with our community and have a voice in that process. Now I'm going to move forward to our annual report. Everyone should have gotten one when they registered outside at the table. We'll just basically give an overview on what the commission has done over the last year. So beginning in 2016, the ordinance was changed and the commission, beginning in 2017, was moved from St. Paul Police Department into the Hero Department. Beginning in October of 2017, 8 new commissioners came on and they began reviewing cases. Since then, we had two vacancies throughout 2018, of which we just recently had those commission vacancies filled. We also hired a new review coordinator. Over the past year, we have seen a total of 39 complaints have gone through the HERO office. 29 were reviewed by the commission for a total of 63 allegations. An allegation can, in which case doesn't necessarily have to be one allegation per officer. There can be multiple allegations per officer. Above, we have a breakdown of the type of allegations. As you can clearly see, improper procedure is the most prevalent allegation that comes forward, mainly due to its vagueness in nature. As Senior Commander Thomas already explained the disposition definitions, here's another opportunity for you all to see what each definition, what it means for a complaint to be found unfounded, exonerated, not sustained, sustained, and to be a policy failure. So the recommended disposition, you can clearly see that not sustained was the most found recommendation by the commission. Only when a complaint is sustained is the recommended discipline included with the case, and that if the chief decides to impose a discipline and it falls through the grievance process and that discipline is imposed, is that data available to the public. However, we do try and make this, our recommendations, more readily available to the public so they are more informed and are transparent what the PCRC is doing. The recommended discipline that this commission came forward, it's important to note that the retraining and supervisory contract, as Commander Thomason has already stated, through the labor contract is not technically discipline. However, it is an option that the commission can put forward when recommending a disciplinary action for an incident in each particular case. In the former data around allegations, firearm case data was not included because it's an entire separate entity. However, the commission did see a total of 6 different firearm cases, of which that involved 6 different officers, although all of those cases that the commission reviewed were found to be justified by the commission. So here's a breakdown of the racial and gender demographic of the complaints that Hero saw that came in. We try and use this data because we really want to understand who's making complaints, how the community is engaging with police, and who's aware of this process. So one of our goals moving forward with increasing our outreach and engagement is making sure that everyone knows that this process is available, know that they can take advantage and utilize this process so that we're making people more aware of it. Now we have, as one of our new initiatives, we've created a marketing statement, which our chair, Chuck, will come forward again to explain what this means for the commission moving forward.
So one of the things that we heard last year from many members of the public was that folks didn't really know what the commission was, or how we operated, or how they could file a complaint. And so what we did is to develop this marketing statement that really sets out, really sets out what PCARC does and why we exist. And it took us a lot of time to distill it into the bullet points that are on that paper in front of you. We wanted to make sure that it was in plain language, that it was easy for people to understand, and also easy for them to know where they could go if they needed to file a complaint. So we are set up to give ordinary people a voice in how complaints about St. Paul police officers are handled. And it is important to know that we only deal with complaints about St. Paul police officers. So if someone has a complaint about an officer in another jurisdiction, that is not something that we have any say about. We do all strive to review the complaints fairly, taking into account both sides of the story, and that is something that we all pride ourselves on. We are representatives of the community, but we also pride ourselves on being objective, as well as empathetic. So you should be assured that when we review complaints, we're going to look at it fairly. We're going to look at the evidence, we're going to look at it from both sides, and we're going to reach a fair conclusion. We do make recommendations, as we mentioned, to the St. Paul Chief of Police about any action that we feel should be taken. Again, we don't always agree amongst ourselves, but we do operate on the majority, and that's how we make our decisions. Again, by law, the police chief makes the final decision about any action that will be taken. And then, again, all of the PCARC members are chosen by the mayor and appointed by city council. And there are only 9 of us, but we try to cover as many types of diversity, both geographic and demographic, as we can, and we keep that in mind when I'm sure the mayor keeps that in mind too when folks are appointed. We do meet at different places in the community each month. We've met, I think, at just about all of the rec centers around the city. We've also been at the Rondo Library. So we try to meet at different places in the community each month, and if you go to the PCARC website, you will be able to see where we're meeting each month. We do welcome feedback and questions. Each of our meetings has both a private side where we actually do the deliberations on the case, and a public side where, you know, the community could come and ask questions. We typically, in the public meetings, will review our minutes from the last meeting. We'll talk about any updates on maybe community functions that we've attended or that we plan to attend. We get an update from the director of HERO on what's going on in HERO and what might impact our work. And then we adjourn to the private side where we actually deliberate about the case. If you have any information that you want to share with PCARC, the number is there, and also you can go to our website. So I think that's about it.
Now we get to the fun part. So last year we had as you can see in the front tables that are numbered, we had an opportunity for you all to engage and talk with your commission members. And these are some of the questions you all, and comments you all, concerns you all had about the PCR. Constance has addressed all of these in this particular presentation, but now we want to hear from you all again and see what are the next steps in as we're moving forward in this process as the PCR is. We would like to hear on what you all would like to see from the PCR and what you think is working, what isn't working. So, as I stated, the purpose is to get feedback. We liked what you all like to see. How are you guys understanding this process? Are there any areas of concern that weren't included in this presentation? So at each table, there will be a commissioner, Commander Thomaser, Senior Commander Thomaser, as well as some members from the community engagement, St. Paul Police Department community engagement team will be walking around, being able to answer some questions about the police that you may have regarding the police department that necessarily the PCR can't answer. And I encourage you all to use the comment cards that you all should have received at the HERO table when you're registered. And we'll have about 30 to 45 minutes for you all to get those questions answered.